Took a little bit of a break. Would you like to tell the audience why?
I was struck down by an act of God.
All right, Avery. It's been a little bit. Took a little bit of a break. Would you like to tell the audience why?
I was struck down by an act of God.
Yeah. Why do you think you got struck down by God?
Because I'm a very unlucky individual. He did not want me going on a fun trip with the boys, so he struck me down with COVID. And I've
That's right. We were
lesson.
supposed to do, for the audience who doesn't know, we were supposed to do Purge. Purge convinced 3 of us to go to his place for a week when we were at Riyadh. And so it was supposed to be me, Avery Jenkins, and Purge hanging out for a week doing real life activities like touching grass and things like that. And and the morning of when we were supposed to leave, we get a message from Avery at like 6 a.m. Hey guys, I'm sick and I think it might be COVID. So we have postponed that trip. Still gonna try and do it, but it's also a reason why the episodes of Not for Broadcast have been delayed, because we had to wait for Avery to be able to speak again. So
rough out there, man. I don't know what I can say. I don't know where I got it from. Freak accident. Again, unbelievable timing as usual. But we are back. We are back. I did not miss much.
I'm beginning to believe that you actually are cursed. I'm beginning
I am.
to buy
I've literally
into
told
this.
you this.
It's been a few years now, and I'm beginning to believe a little bit, just a little.
Yeah,
bit.
starting to understand. It's getting there for you.
Okay,
I'll tell you who else is cursed, though, Austin.
Yeah, who's cursed?
I have a topic for today. Bet you didn't see that one coming.
I didn't. No.
You know who's cursed in Dota?
Who's cursed?
The player-run organization. Are we witnessing the downfall of the player-run organization? That's my question for today. For everybody listening, can think about it themselves. Has it come to its end? Right now, if you remember the history of Dota 2, Dota 2 starts off. There's no orgs in Dota. Some medium-sized esports orgs come in. Early on, they build themselves up. The evil geniuses, the Cloud9s, right? But then at a certain point, players win big. Players win big. They have big rep. They have a lot going for them. They can convince high rank and high tier players to join their teams. Why? Not because their organization behind them is huge, but because that player is huge and he promises victory. He promises that if you join with me as Puppy, if you join with me as No Tail and Zeb, that we are going to win a lot. Therefore, I don't have to overpay you. I don't have to have some massive work because we're going to win. And winning in Dota counts for everything, Austin, because winning, especially at TI, is your salary for the year. That is where your lifeblood comes from. But now none of that's true. Does winning matter as much in Dota as having a big org behind you that can provide you good salary and good resources and maybe get those good players from a TI that goes by that you're trying to poach because now they want a higher guaranteed salary instead of like, well, I don't know if going and playing with this guy makes that big of a difference compared to the rest of the pool anymore, and he can't offer me as much. So is the player-owned org dead? Is the model dead? We've seen models die in esports before. We've seen it on the TO side, right? The BTSs of the scene, slain in their youth. This is what I was thinking about because I was almost slain in my prime. Okay, I was brought down by an act of God in my prime, my youth, when I was on top of everything. And while I was sitting there in delirium, thinking about my life choices, I said, thank God I did not found a player org because I would not want to be sitting there right now in the current Dota ecosystem as an OG, as a secret, liking my prospects going into the next 2 or 3 years when I can't recruit players because I can't compete. I don't have the sponsor buildup because it's really hard because all the sponsors pulled out of Dota. I can't really compete with tournament organizers by hosting my own sort of content or events because that's just gone the way of things like BetBoom or PGL with betting sponsors where it's all betting or crypto money basically, and they're just going to start advertising themselves. Even things like Shopify Rebellion, right? One of the newer, bigger orgs to come into Dota. Kind of a weird esports org in terms of what we were used to traditionally because they don't have sponsors. They are the sponsor. They're just paying for the advertising directly. So these models have shifted considerably, and I feel like this player-owned org that used to be a huge deal going back 5 or 6 years, that was like exactly what you wanted, right? The OG Secret Enigma, everybody wanted to play on those teams. That was how you made more money as a player. That was how you secured your financial future. Did it actually pan out? And is it in a good state now? I feel like it's not. I feel like it's on a downward trajectory. Not that I have anything against them, but like something happened to them boys.
So I have to assume that outside of God attempting to strike you down like you're Job in the Bible,
yes,
outside of the plague and locusts that have been sent upon ye, I assume some of this has to do with the recent news of the PGO Wallachia qualifiers that are currently going on, and 2 player-owned organizations in Western Europe were competing, and both of them fell. OG and Team Secret both lost to I don't know how to say their name, Avulus cyberspace. I've never apparently this is an org because they have cyberspace in their name. I have to assume this is an actual org, but they ended up beating them. It's a team with Smiling Knight, Stormstormer, Zibe, Eki, and Seneko. So not like, totally unknown names or anything. These are known quantities within the Dota space. Definitely some pretty decent like tier two players in that roster. They managed to make a lower bracket run that had them take down OG 2-0, had them take down Secret 2-1, and then they got into the grand finals against Dandelions and managed to 3-0. But Dandelions also another org, not an org, just another team that managed to take down OG and Team Secret. They took them down in the upper bracket. So these player-owned organizations got beat by the, non-organization or random organization that's coming in or whatever they are. They got beat by, twice in this qualifier by the random guys. So I assume that this is what has sparked this conversation for you.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, obviously, I think the general response to that is like, oh, look at the teams. They're doing so bad. Ha, ha, ha. I'm a classic Redditor preying on every good Dota captain organization's downfall. I was like, yeah, maybe that's true. I don't really care. But the interesting part to me was the actual structure, because I do think there's a lot of truth in the fact that the player-owned orgs are struggling in terms of attracting newer talent or competing with some of the other big dogs right now in paying those talent. Because I know they just don't have nearly the salary-based resources to do that.
Yeah.
It's just how they're set up. Particularly someone like Secret. Like Puppy's just not going to be able to go out and pay players $25K a month. It's just not, I just don't see it happening. I mean, maybe he would eventually for a season or something, like if he really wants to blow the bank, but it's just not even, it just doesn't even make sense for him. It doesn't make sense for that kind of org. I'm not sure it makes sense for a lot of these other orgs, to be honest, but that's for them to decide, and so I do think it puts them in a very tough position. The interesting part, though, is that I think these orgs like Secret, OG, Enigma, or whatever still have a lot of brand value, and they still have a lot of fan base following in the scene. They have a lot of legacy value, and that's worth something in Dota 2. Like, that is worth a decent amount, right? You field an OG team, you field a Secret team. It kind of doesn't matter who's on it. People are going to watch. Like, you're actually going to garner a pretty decent amount of fan following. Now, some of that is linked to, like, these old guys like Kuro and Puppy still playing, but I actually think they have pretty decent fan base response. And so is there a world where some of these third-party sponsors like a Shopify type company or a betting sponsor like BetBoom come in and buy out these player-owned orgs or buy out a huge chunk of them instead of just like starting their own and basically name take over the thing, right? Secret.betboom, whatever you want to do. I feel like this has been happening in China for a while. You see big Chinese companies basically buy out the name / ownership stake in a large LGD or something, or partner with them. Like, I feel like that's the inevitable direction these orgs are going to have to go if they want to maintain a tier 1 status in Dota, because I don't see them getting it back without being able to afford player salaries, because there's no real other incentive to get players right now. Like, even if you could promise them that, hey, if you play with us, you're going to like win TI. I mean, you can't make that promise, but whatever thing is close to that, I think doesn't even matter as much anymore. Like, I don't think players genuinely care as much that they win some specific event versus they're on a good team. Like they'd rather be on the good team with the good org than I have like a higher chance of winning TI. That was not true 6 years ago, but I think it is true.
Okay. I think there's two different topics here. One of which is like the captain led, like personality led, like team, that build around Puppy, Kuro, etc. Is that concept dead? And are the player owned organizations in Dota dead? Now, in Dota specifically, because these orgs have all expanded outside of Dota, does it matter if they are that relevant in their original game? If they are able to have success in other fields? Maybe part of the reason they're not in Dota is that they're actually just, they have a better understanding of the economics of the space and know where to go where there is more value, right? I do know that, for example, Team Secret, I believe they got, I think a couple years ago, they invested into Valorant. They got a spot in Valorant as a result of their team doing well. I know Alliance, actually, another team owned organization that I thought was actually dead. I thought, I wasn't even sure what that, but it seems like they did very well in Apex Legends. They got first place at EWC in there. And I saw a rumor, zero inside information here, but I saw a rumor that the Dandelions team is somehow backed by Alliance. I don't even know what that could possibly mean. But maybe it just means that they're in talks with Alliance, and maybe Alliance is going to try and sponsor them for next year. We'll see if they end up coming back to Dota. But like maybe it's just these orgs, because they aren't as big, right? Because they did start off as player-owned organizations and weren't able to make the big transition into tier 1 esport organizations. They don't have the kind of funding to be able to have teams in these tier 1 esports. That they just move into the tier 2 esports scene, which is probably, if I had to guess, a lot more economically feasible and actually a lot more value to be had there. The money that you spend and the return that you get off of it, because Team Secret, I believe they have Honor of Kings. Actually, I'm going to pull it up right now. They've got Valorant, Rocket League, Rainbow Six Siege, Honor of Kings, League of Legends. They have a League of Legends team. Weird. I believe I think they're just in Southeast Asia. Yeah. So I see, again, also more value. I also noticed that a lot of these orgs are between Secret and Alliance are also usually in Southeast Asia. They're basing their space. And maybe that's also just part of, they were successful in Dota. They're a big name in Dota, which means naturally you're a bigger name in Southeast Asia. But I just also noticed that they typically are, when they're in these tier 2 scene, they're usually backing players out of Southeast Asia, which is usually more, bang for your buck in that regard, right? So OG tried to make their move into Counter-Strike. They're still there. They're just not doing the best. And they also have a Rocket League team. I have no idea how they're doing there. But OG definitely trying to make a bigger push into the bigger tier 1 esports in Counter-Strike. And there was a moment where they were successful. It doesn't seem like they had managed to continue that success, though. So I don't know. I mean, I feel like I would rather be Team Secret than OG, when it comes to the player-owned organizations and the spacing that you have. They seem to, I would rather be in multiple tier 2 esports, basically, than, failing in another tier 1 esport.
I guess just what does that do for you anyway? Like, what does being in a bunch of esports right now do for an esports company? Because I don't think it makes you any money. I think its only value is building the company up in terms of brand value, reach, outreach, your scope within the scene, your feasibility to implement sponsors across different platforms and games and regions, should you be able to get them. Like, there is value there and it is worth something. I doubt a lot of esports orgs are strictly profitable right now. There are probably some. I'm not sure which those are, but I feel like the majority of the value is like, okay, well, you can build this up and then maybe one day sell it to somebody or sell a stake of the company to someone, again, who's coming in trying to take over and build up their own org. It's just like, is that something that's actually going to happen in the world of Dota 2?
Yeah, are we going to have that second round of sports organizations, football clubs, basketball teams, whatever it is, coming in and trying to buy up esports teams? Because there was that moment, that was the gold rush, right? Where we had esports teams and sports orgs, traditional sports media was interested in esports. They started buying up some teams. That was where you got to sell for big money. Will that actually happen again? And as far as like whether or not, I think the economics of these organizations is a little bit of mystery to me anyway. But that's for the tier 1 orgs. For the tier 2 orgs, when you're operating in tier 2 esports, especially like some of these mobile games, I have no idea. But they could be profitable just because I know the mobile games are like crazy popular.
Yeah, I think I would rather be in that spot, honestly. Like I would rather run a mobile esports org than like a Dota.
I would rather be in Honor of Kings right now. Yeah. So
I guess I just looking back on all the years, because I remember I was there, 3,000 years ago when No Tail cast his salary into the fires of Mount Doom and founded his own esports org to pay himself nothing. I was there when that happened, and it's been, I feel like almost 8 years now, 8 or 9 years of these player owned orgs in Dota 2. And back then they made a lot of sense because you got to keep a higher percent of the winnings, which was pretty big. Like that was the majority of the money in esports, and you got to control your destiny a lot more and control your team. And also the idea of, hey, we're going to build something up that we own, so one day it'll be worth something, and that'll also be a payoff. Like over those 9 years, would someone like Puppy or No Tail have they actually done better by going this direction than if they had just taken the more traditional route of like, let's say they went to, Liquid's a great example because I feel like they're just like a pretty standard esports org, right? Like, let's say they just went to Liquid and built what either of those type of guys caliber could have done at Liquid over 8 years, right? And what the average salaries would have been over those time and their brand value and all of that. I feel like it would just have been better for them by now. Yeah. Even considering the resale value of the org, because those orgs also cost a lot of money to run, and a lot of that comes from them either personal funding or putting their brand value on the line or whatever.
I mean, I guess
I'm not trying to make fun of it or judge it or something. It's just interesting to me because I had not considered this until God struck me down and put me in a state of delirium. That like my brain was so used to, of course you would want to be a player run org in Dota 2. Of course you would. Because
of course you would want equity in something, which
yes,
is
you would
where
want
something,
equity,
if you stuck with an organization, presumably you are probably not getting equity unless you are so big, which in case, like in the case of specifically Puppy, let's say he was sort of like, I don't know, like a Counter-Strike example, like Pasha Biceps or somebody like that kind of like maybe. Old school, like super old school name. Maybe he does get some sort of equity in Virtus Pro, Navi, whatever at some point. But
yeah, it's possible. If you played at Liquid for 8 years, maybe some, not Liquid, but a company like that, you get a 1-2%, whatever. I'm saying like all these factors considered, it's just ingrained in my brain that you want it to be a player owned org in Dota 2 because economically it made sense. I don't think that's true anymore. And I don't think it's been true for a while. And I don't think it's going to be true ever again, because I don't see the player prize pool as a percentage of the money you earn in a year going up again.
I mean, couldn't salaries drop so dramatically?
The one exception is salaries could drop, but in that case, it's not really good for you to be in Dota that's not helping the Dota ecosystem. So if you're still running your own org, it probably means part of the Dota ecosystem's collapsing a bit, which isn't necessarily good for you. It means you can get players for cheaper, but it also means there's probably less interest in the scene. Thus why orgs are willing to pay players less. Right? There's some correlation there. It's not a 1-to-1, but that you're not necessarily super happy about that. You'd be very happy if the very top prices came down, but that didn't affect the scene overall. That's what would help you, which could in theory happen. But even then, I don't know, dude. I just don't see it panning out, honestly. And I'm not sure it has. And it's kind of weird because they had such an advantage for so long. And it was like such a big deal. And the thing with OG is obviously those guys, like they won 2 TIs, they won a fuck ton of prize money. They probably made whatever they would have lost back by the fact they made extra percentage off that and like translated into a bunch of other stuff, right? Their books, their their content. I'm not saying those guys are in a bad position, but like, it is interesting that somehow after 10 years of this, we got back to a place where like the Gaimons and the Liquids and like the Tundras and the traditional org setup with a bunch of guys at top that don't know the game and a bunch of players that don't trust management and they're getting paid high salary is like somehow back to like where you want to be now. It's just like, what the fuck happened, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it went from
I feel like I've had COVID for 10 years, you know, like how do we get back here?
It is a similar space in that it early on, it was getting a salary at all was great. And of course you would take that. And now it's getting a huge salary is great. And you would take that. Absolutely. And there was this weird middle ground where salaries were not that high and prize pool was exceptionally high. But I do take issue with like all of that. I don't think necessarily that prize pools being so much higher than salaries actually have one thing that I take issue with is what you said is that you asked, does winning matter as much anymore? And I would say, yeah, it definitely still does. 100%.
No, I said winning like a big tournament and that's it. I said what matters more is being on a good team with a good org. So a good team, you're still going to win some, you know?
Yeah.
But I would argue players would rather be on the team that's like let's say you got, you know, like Liquid, right? I think Liquid's
you would
a great
rather
example.
play second at a bunch of tournaments than win one TI.
Like how many players would rather be on Liquid getting second, third, second, fourth, right? Over like someone like maybe, not that Falcons have been bad, but like let's say you know, or you win like an EWC or you win a TI and then you get like a second or a fourth and then you're like an 8th and a 12th and right, that kind of team, right? Way more inconsistent, but you like won a TI. If you asked any player 5 years ago, would you rather win TI or get second at every other tournament? They'd say win TI. Not even close. Not even close. Nowadays, what I'm saying is I don't know if that's true as much. I think people would have to think about it a lot more. And I feel like a lot more would be leaning towards, I'd rather be on the Liquid, who's like really good team, solid dudes, very consistent, never has like a terrible placement outside of Dream League, has a really good org behind them that's stable, well-known, well-liked, pays out, right? Gives them resources. And they rather have that situation, even if the chance to win TI is maybe slightly lower than like, I'm going to go play on Team Secret and my chance to win TI is the highest it's going to be. Which
okay,
used
but
to be the case.
I disagree. In what situation do you have a better chance at winning TI while being on a team that sucks more for the rest of the year? I think it's just that I think this whole like winning TI thing is just entirely like I think most of that is just RNG at that point in time. It's just random, right? Like some team just happens. Some team just happens to be in the right spot, the right place, the right time, pops off at the right time, and makes a great run at TI at a very high pressure tournament, right? Like it's a great story and everything, but there is several, there's a lot of randomness to it.
Austin, who do you give a higher chance to win this next TI? That's all I'm asking. First place, not anything else. I'm not asking average placement. I'm saying who has a higher chance to win TI?
Yeah.
Team Liquid or Team Spirit?
Yeah, but Team Spirit have won a bunch
Answer
of
the question,
tournaments.
Austin. Answer the question, Austin. Answer the question, Austin.
I think it might be Liquid, actually.
No, you're full of shit. You know that. You're so full of shit.
I actually legitimately believe that.
I refuse to accept that answer. I refuse to accept that answer based on average discussions.
That is not the same because Team Spirit have been a top dog this year, during this year. They have gotten a first place.
They've done okay.
They have shown that they can be the best.
Of course, but any team that's going to win TI, any team that's going to win TI in the modern age of Dota is probably going to have a decent year now. You know, there's not too many like black horse outliers, right? Yeah. We're probably looking at 4 or 5 teams. I'm just saying, I'm comparing it to where it was 6 years ago because obviously things have consolidated. But if you go back 6 years, I think there were teams where if you went and played with Puppy on Secret, if you went and played with even someone like PPD, right? Like these guys, people viewed it as my chance to win TI goes up considerably if I join this team. Mm-hmm. But my situation throughout the year, from a salary standpoint, org stability standpoint, maybe my chances of not getting kicked are all worse, right? Whereas if I join a team where like I'm building it with people who are maybe more at my caliber, don't have as good a track record, the potential maybe isn't as high at the start, but it can be built up. Like those things are maybe more secure and stable for me, but my chances to literally win a TI are lower. I think that's shifted. That's all I'm saying.
The chance of winning TI, isn't that a chicken and egg scenario? Isn't that just like the fact that that person that you believe that person is going to increase your chance of winning TI, and other people believe that as well, means that that person then has their choice of the best talent in the scene. Yeah. And then therefore, you know, like it self-fulfills, and that, but as soon as that faith is gone,
that's literally Team Secret.
Which
you
is
just
now
described
Team Secret. Yes.
The entire life form of Team Secret.
People
that
no longer have that faith,
time.
and now it's gone, right? And so, I mean, again, I feel like there was just like a decent amount of like randomness to that sort of thing, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the one caveat here is that when I say win TI, it also includes an average placement. So like when you were evaluating this back in the day, you know, people wanted to play with Puppy because it felt like they had a decent shot to maybe win TI in a given year.
Yeah, I'll get top
But
3.
like my worst placement might be a 3rd to 6th, and that's still a fuck ton of money. So like I'm still getting,
unless you were a Team Secret in 2016, in which case.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, there's outliers, right? But I just don't think that exists anymore. I don't think you can really point to a certain set of team or players and say that that's so much higher than other stuff. I mean, outside of like, you know, you're a tier 3 or 4 player and you get some crazy opportunity. Like, of course you're going to take that. You're dumb not to. But if I went and said like, I'm going to have you join Gaimin, Liquid, Bet Boom, Tundra, you know, Ame's team, XG, like if I'm going to put you on any of these teams, are you picking one or the other because you feel like your chance to actually win TI is that much better than at the other places? Probably not. It's probably based on like who you feel like you're going to have good chemistry with and get along with and enjoy playing with, and is going to do well and work hard and fits whatever your ethos is and has a good org. Like I feel like those are what you're thinking about at that point, you know?
Sure.
Like I'm not going into Gaimin or Liquid thinking like, oh, I'm on Gaimin, I can't lose TI now, or I'm on Liquid, can't lose TI. Like I don't think the gap is that large anymore.
Would you say that's a good thing? Because I view it the way you're describing it to me, it sounds like a great thing. It sounds like there is a high amount of competition, right? In the fact that there is no one person or one team that you can go to and be like, I've got it in the bag. I'm probably in the grand finals for one.
I mean, I think this goes back to that discussion we had.
The singular focus on one tournament, like consistency is important. You can't just dip out for 9 months and then show up for one tournament in gear and do well at that tournament and then be like, all right, cool, I'm good.
That part's good for sure.
It sounds like the motivations for what you actually choose a team are better, right? It's less so about doing well at this one tournament and the money that happens there, and more so about like what my environment is going to be like and the people I'm going to be working with. Because for sure, you know, if my range is all kind of the same between these 4 different teams, wouldn't it be better for that person just to like, isn't it better for the scene in some ways that person goes to a team that they have more chemistry with the people that they're working with and more positive atmospheres? I mean, maybe it's a loss to the viewer, and you know, where you have less of Puppy throwing headsets and, you know, Wings getting into fist fights before TI. Like maybe you have less of that drama, but
unconfirmed rumor. I think it goes back to this debate we had where it was like, there's more competition, but it feels like at a certain point in the tournament that the winner is more clear somehow. Like I'm thinking about this in terms of, I think for players it's better, but for viewers there's still something about it that's weird. Like I feel like you have this more even playing field between the top 4 or 6 teams than we've had in a long time. Usually there's a clear dominator to the pack. Even in years where you have that, maybe someone has a slight edge, like Gaimin wins a bunch of majors or something, but they could have been upset at a lot of those tournaments, right? It wasn't like they were so much leagues better than everybody that it was just 100-0. Like obviously they were the best team at those events and they probably were very favored to win them, but it wasn't. They could have got upset in a lot of those series, right? Liquid could have beat him in some of those finals. Bet Boom maybe could have taken him in a series here or there. Like it was doable. It wasn't just like some of the years where you had VP or Secret that were like, there was literally nobody close in skill level. But it feels like that at some point these tournaments, it's like clear that one of these teams is just playing better. Spirit's gonna make a run. Gaiman's just they have their Underlord meta. It's over. They're gonna face Liquid in the finals again. It's like I don't know. It's just, it doesn't feel like the parity creates an excitement for the viewer of the tournament, at least to me. I'm not sure why exactly that is.
I mean, I would say that
there's fake evenness. I don't know.
I think that the consistency factor actually kind of ruins it, because one, we're not singularly focused on one tournament, and these teams' performances are way less up and down, right? They have a much higher floor, and as a result, TI doesn't matter quite as much. The pressure isn't as high, so that also is going to decrease the variance in individual play and team play, right? So like you have less pressure, therefore, some people don't choke quite as much. And then again, their floor is just better because they've been consistent throughout the year. I would say all of that adds to a TI where you feel like you kind of know what the outcome is going to be, and there is less likely to be these big chokes or these fairy tale runs. Yeah, I can kind of see that for sure.
I also think it's the stupid Europeans, man.
Yeah, I mean the biggest problem is definitely the fact that it's very region dominated. Right?
Yeah, it's Western just one group, right?
Yeah,
like there's no enemy. I was thinking about this. Like, who's the enemy in Dota? You need enemies to create storylines, and I'm not talking about like individual heals. Like, oh, Quinn's a heal for a year, huh? Like, I mean that actually does help, but you need like people that are going to compete against each other to create a storyline. And right now, I feel like in Dota, it's just like once you get down to the last 6 teams, every tournament, it's like 5 of them are European. There's maybe a Chinese team. I mean, those are the more hype ones, right? For obvious reason. That's kind of it. Like, let's be honest here, folks. Southeast Asia sucked dick for like 3 years. North America's fucking dead. Like, they are buried like 20 feet underground, never coming back. South America, they're a region you want to believe can do well, but like, when was the last time they fielded a stable team that actually did well in LAN? They have their burst. They get a top 8 or here or there with Hector, and that's like it. They've never contended for an actual championship in like the years I've known it. Now their players are getting poached too. Not going to help them.
No.
Who am I missing? I mean, I consider.
Do you separate Eastern Europe?
No, I don't anymore. I think Eastern Europe and Western Europe, they play against each other too much, and the players get exchanged too much that you can't really separate those regions entirely.
Yeah, now, I do think look at it like an entity, and there's like 4. Like Russian players on it. It's like, okay, well, they're not really Western Europe, but they're playing in Western Europe, and
they're playing on the same server. They're scrimming against each other. They're sharing player pools. It's very similar at this point. I do think Eastern Europe's more separated from Western on the lower tier. Like if you go to like the tier 2 and 3 of Eastern Europe, those are a bit more like old school CIS teams, and I think there's some bit of separation there. But those guys generally have a good player base. To me, it's like China. Like those teams could always develop. Even if they're not right now, they could, there's still potential there.
Yeah.
But no one's going to look at, like, nobody watches like Team Spirit play a European team and feels like they're enemy combatants, right? I just don't think that same vibe is there. It's not like a European versus a Chinese team or a Southeast Asian team making a final or even a North American team playing against anybody. There is not the same type of vibe. It can exist, but it's not really. So I think
the teams are too friendly with each other.
Yeah, there's no dynamic. Like you get to the last 6 spots as the last 2 days of any event. It's 5 or 6 European teams. Team Spirit's there, maybe XG. Like 18 out of your 20 games are just like a bunch of dudes circle jerk handshaking each other. Like, oh yeah, congrats on your money. Oh yeah, congrats on your money. Oh yeah, they're the good team. We like them. Oh, we're all friends. And then they go to a Taylor Swift concert together and post it on Instagram. And it's like.
I mean, when they get knocked out of the tournament, like they still don't want the other Western European. Like you want your own region to lose for the people who there is some inside in that bit where when they get knocked out of the tournament, they don't want their own region to win. All the Western Europeans are cheering for Extreme Gaming at that point in time as soon as they get knocked out. But they are still very friendly with each other.
Yeah,
are friends.
they all know
outside of
each
the
other.
game, and
They played with each other a lot. They like each other. They're good friends.
Yeah, they're former
Absolutely
teammates
nothing wrong
or their
with that.
future teammates at some point.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not saying that's not how it should be, but like, man, for the viewer, I think it does bleed in, and you get to this point where it's just like, oh, what European team that is friendly with all the other ones is going to win today, you know? And it's just like, there's no stakes here as a viewer. There's absolutely no stakes. You could not care less whether game in 1, game in 2, game in 3, Liquid 1, Liquid 2, like, what difference does it make in the podium finish, right? There just really isn't one. It's just the same group of European teams winning every event together, going from one to the other, finishing in the top 4 or 5 out of 6. And who wins one or the other, kind of just like, who cares, right? They're all going to be at the same concert later. So like, I don't know why I find that funny. I do. But like, when you have an outlier team, it creates some excitement. When you have a team that isn't friendly with another team, it creates some excitement. And I feel like the only drama that's really been about that is Falcons. But again, to me, they're another European team. I know it's a MENA org. Yeah. I know it's like a Falcons org, but let's be real, dude. People look at that team, they see a European team because of the players. The players are just such a ingrained like European unit mostly. It's not 100% true, but it's not like you built up a team of underdog MENA region players to come and tackle the big European guys, right? That is not what happened. If that had happened, like I actually think Quest, for example, I know people hate on Quest because they like to hate on like their play style. I've hated on their play style a bit, but like that team is actually a way more interesting team storyline to me than someone like Falcons because they actually represent the MENA region a bit more, and they represent kind of this like team that, I mean, I'm not saying they're super MENA, but I'm saying they're like this team that has grown up together a bit more or stayed together for a decent time and tried to improve. And there's no like big wins on the roster. There's no like crazy tier 1.
Yeah, there's no tier 1 Western European player on that roster.
Exactly. And to me, that's like if they went deep in a LAN, like when they were about to potentially beat Falcons at EWC, that was kind of hype, right? I was like, oh shit, like these guys are kind of doing something. That to me is why it was hype. That can create a storyline. When you have Falcons, Gaiman, Liquid, BetBoom, Team Spirit dominating 5 of the 6 slots in almost any event, and these teams all have huge pedigrees, huge resumes, they've already won a huge amount of stuff, their orgs are giant, they're getting paid a fuck ton, and they're all basically from the same region, it's like, who am I rooting for here and why? Who am I separating out of this pack and why? The only team that I enjoy doing it is, I mean, I root for Quinn sometimes because like he's my boy, but Team Spirit to me is the only one who's kind of stands out a bit because they actually have tournaments where they just suck massive dick. And I don't know why. I don't know why it is, but I think that's like actually
their
the
play style
reason.
the most, right?
Yeah, I think I like their play style, but I'm not going to hold that against other people.
Most people agree that Team Spirit is a fun team to watch.
Exactly, they're a fun team to watch, but I also think it's because they have tournaments where they just get like last. They'll just go to a tournament and get fucking last and be like, holy shit, like this team just fucking sucks massive dick right now. They're gonna have to become good, and then at least you have some kind of arc.
Yeah,
like,
there's a bit of
figuring it out. You know,
there's a bit of OG magic going on there, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, these guys are champions, but they're not consistent champions. Where I know they're gonna do well at this tournament. I don't know, and I'm just hoping.
Exactly. I have no idea, and so that to me is a bit of exciting. Like I want to see them at their full form and their full potential because they're super fun to watch. But am I going to get that right? Or are all these other cheesy European teams going to mid-Huskar? Like, you know, that's my storyline at least. But that's something. All these others, I just have nothing to go on. And China's too weak to challenge them. The other regions are dead, as I said. It's just like that, I think, is the biggest thing killing the viewership hype for a lot of these tournaments that people don't talk about because they're too busy talking about like, oh, it's the game state, whatever. Honestly, the more I thought about this, I think it isn't the game state. Now, I think we've had a lot of discussions about this, about like the way the game is designed right now and things about the map and going high ground. And I mean, you can get in this for hours. We've done it too, about what about the current balance of the game makes it uninteresting to watch. Our biggest gripe has been like fights around the Roshan pit, which I still stand by. I think there's still stuff like that that's like kind of fucked for the viewer experience. But I actually think about this more. I think one of the biggest things is that it's this factor of like, there's no, the average storyline in a tournament is just not nearly as good as what it used to be for all these factors we've discussed. And even if you make your game 10% more fun to watch, it's not going to change that. Like at the end of the day, you need that sort of upset potential or storyline potential or something to put people in a position where they feel it so that the games become more hype as a result. Until that exists, then gameplay can only do so much. Like someone can only make so many great axe calls. I don't know. Like you just can't rely on that. It's competition. There's randomness.
No, I will say that I like this discussion and breakdown of the topic better than what I've seen on Reddit, because I had a big gripe with some recent posts. I mean, there was I feel like it's kind of cringe. These Team Secret ones keep popping up about like, there was all this copium about like all of these players were gone except for Puppy, and everybody was just like, oh, it's gonna be Puppy, RTZ, and like everyone just put in their like dream list of like retired players all coming back together for Team Secret, and it was obviously just a bunch of copium. There was that post of the 2020 Team Secret, and people jerking it about the uncrowned kings, and 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 all of them just waiting for the Team Secret roster to finally be announced. And when it does get announced, it's just like everybody's just like, oh fuck. But part of that is that I think a lot of people are just nostalgia pilled right now, that they just don't enjoy Dota as much as they used to, whatever. And they think back to the golden days. They think back to these other rosters that got them excited, and they want that to come back. And they look at the current situation, and it's not that. It's not 2016 right now. It's not 2016. It's 2024. And they're disappointed, in which case they put blame. They're like, well, it's somebody else's fault. And they put the blame on the players, the teams, the organizations was the biggest one that I saw. These orgs are doing a bad job of advertising their players. That is absolutely not the case. The organizations, I feel like, are doing way more than they've ever done to try and advertise their players. There's not that much interest in it, is the problem. They try and generate the product, but the community doesn't watch the stuff. I've seen the numbers. I've gone through these things, and it's just like there are so many of these, like Team Spirits, Gaming Gladiators, Team Liquid. You can go back and you can get the behind the scenes footage of all of these teams. It gets some pretty interesting stuff. Spirit is definitely the most candid about like strategy and draft and all this sort of thing, right? You can get a bunch of inside info on these teams and players and get to know about their personalities, but people just aren't interested. Like, it's being produced. The orgs are doing the thing to try and advertise their players, but the community just isn't interested. And I think that has way more to do with basically people just like wishing for the olden days, and just being disappointed by the present than the orgs and players and teams actually doing the wrong thing. I think that like, if you wanted to be interested, if you wanted to be a fan of a team, there are the resources to find your favorite. Right?
But why?
I think that is out there.
Why would I want to invest my time to learn about the new Secret roster? Right? I'll pose that question. I'm not saying this because that's how I feel. I'm just saying, like, let's say I'm a Dota fan right now. What is my incentive to learn about this new Secret roster?
What is your incentive? I mean, the Secret roster is a little bit weird, but if like you were coming into Dota and
okay,
you wanted
but like
a team to support, that's at
let's
TI.
say OG, OG right now, or okay, you want TI? I mean, even
I'm a fan that wants to cheer for a team at TI.
All right, who's going to TI? Let's look at who's.
Well, we got our normal teams, and then we got Bet Boom, and then Old Entity, now Cloud9. Tundra, One Wid, Team Zero, G2IG, Talon, Aurora, Nouns, Heroic, Beast Coast.
Okay, so like, pick one of those tier 2, tier 3 teams, Talon, Beast Coast, whatever, right? What is my incentive as a fan to learn about these players and teams and root for them? I feel like my incentive is only as good as I believe something's going to come from it. Mm-hmm. And again, right now, I feel like the overwhelming feeling is like, there is no team that is going to challenge the top dogs right now. So why would I root for any of them? Like, there's literally no point. And I don't see anything that's going to change that either. Like, there's
I'm not saying that people are wrong to be less interested or tied to these teams. I'm just saying that it's like, I think people are finding the wrong reason behind why all the disappointment that they
like
see.
You could go and root for an NA team right now But why are you not? Because we all understand there's 0% fucking chance that these NA teams do anything to get into like even probably a top 8 or 12 at this point, right? Like maybe Nouns, like people like to root for Nouns. I see it. The second they start to do well, it's like, oh, I can root for an NA/SA team. Holy hype, it's kind of cool. And then they just get like 8th or 12th, and it's just like, and it's dead for another. Like, and every time that happens, it kills a bit of your fan base because people's belief that you can actually do something goes down a bit. That's why NA fans actually come out of the woodwork whenever there's any sort of new hope that can do something, which mainly was like the RTZ stack. Anytime like the RTZ stack got a new player, that was when you saw the most NA fans, like when they got a Ramses or they got S4 or Sumail came back or whatever, right? Because it was like, oh shit, maybe this is the version that's like actually going to challenge all these other top dogs, right? And a lot of times they did. They got like a top 3 or went to the finals of Singapore Major or stuff like that.
But once the number one NA team was getting 12 tournament after tournament.
Yeah, it's dead. It's gone. No one has any faith. You have to reinstill that faith. Like at this point, if you want fans and viewers in Dota from one of these regions that hasn't done anything in a while, you have to prove it to them that you are actually worth rooting for. You have to actually do something. You have to win on land. Like you have to win, go deep, and then you have to do it multiple times to keep that fan base and keep them wanting more. It's not enough to just be like, why aren't people interested in us? Because you haven't done shit in like 4 years. Why the fuck would I start rooting for you? Like, what do I get out? I get nothing out of it. There's no incentive for me to do it. There is never going to be a storyline here. The instant that Talon team, the old Talon was Makoto, before they kicked him and they were on Talon for that year and a half or almost 2. That was a team that actually got some fans. Like they had some international fans rooting for them in the games and stuff. And it was simply because they won enough consistently that like year and a half that, okay, I can start to root for this team. Like they're actually going to stay together. They're not going to instantly disband after a bad result. They actually have potential to challenge some top teams, right? They were beating some pretty good teams in clutch situations on LAN. Oh, lo and behold, now you have some interesting storyline, interesting potential. People are going to root for you. And then I'm sure like your player content and all this stuff goes up. But you have to be able to prove that somehow. And I just don't think it's true of anybody right now. Like, I think it's even hard for teams like OG to get fans. Like these teams that are top tier teams that are struggling are like, people just move on, man. Like at a certain point, they're like, I don't feel like this OG roster is going to win. Fuck it. I'm going to just go start rooting for somebody I think can. I think Tundra is also in that spot right now, right? Like Tundra's in that weird middle place of like, obviously they have a lot of fans because Thompson's someone who gets a lot of people to watch him and root for him because of his play style and everything, right?
Yeah.
But I think they are proving they can challenge top teams. At least we saw it at EWC, right? Yep. And they can make some runs, and they've done it a couple times now, like Birmingham to EWC, whatever. That's enough to like get your foot in the door and get people interested in you and actually start rooting for you to maybe beat some of these teams or hate watching you because maybe they hate pure wrestling. I don't know. But that's still a fan. That's like something to go on, but you have to be able to prove that. If Tundra had just sucked ass for like the entire year and never done anything, they can't just sit there and complain they have no fans. Like, what did you give them to be a fan of? So I think that's the hardest part about Dota 2 is like, it's just so hopeless for every team outside like the top 6 to 8 right now. It's so hopeless from a competitive standpoint.
Yeah. And there is no, to add one more thing to that, there in traditional sports, when your team has zero hope, that like you go through that, you still have some future there, right? I know we suck this year, but I'm a lifelong fan. And 5 years from now, when we're on top, I'm going to watch all these other bandwagoners come in, but I was there when it sucked, right? And esports doesn't typically have that kind of consistency. Dota especially does not have that kind of consistency. And I think that is one problem where when you talk about organizations, that like it's just not much you could do about it if you're an org trying to come into Dota. But it's like there isn't that history, right? If you think about the orgs at TI, the orgs that have history are Team Liquid, right? That's an org that actually has a long history within Dota. You could be a Team Liquid fan, yada, yada, yada. The other one is Cloud9, who in Dota have a very weird, because they haven't been around for a while. So it's like every Cloud9 fan that was a Cloud9 fan, they're like, most of them are gone. And if you are still a Cloud9 fan for whatever reason, like there is nothing to tie you to this new org. Not a single reason why you were a fan of Cloud9 in the old days, 10 years ago. There is no reason for you to be a Cloud9 fan right now.
Mhm.
And so there is nothing tying you there. So the org that actually has the most history outside of Team Liquid is IG, right? So, you know, the Chinese, or I feel like the Chinese scene actually has usually like that sort of thing on lockdown, right? Where there's a couple of orgs that are always going to be kind of up there. One of them was LGD. Well, LGD seems to be going down the shit pipe, right? So, so there goes that. That's not great. Another org where there's a bit of consistency, Team Spirit. That's actually an org and a team. They've been largely the same since you probably became a fan of them, right? So there's another one. Tundra is a weird one because they may have Thompson, but there's nothing tying them to their TI-11 victory where maybe they got some fans. We've talked about how that wasn't necessarily the most charismatic win in the world, but you probably got some fans for winning a TI anyway. There's nothing to tie you to the current Tundra. Gaming Gladiators has been very consistent as a team, but as an organization, they haven't been around that long, right? And also, like, how often are you a fan of orgs that Gaming Gladiators that are like Shopify, right? Where they are a product, basically, right? It's not necessarily an organization with sponsors behind them. They are kind of a product, right? BetBoom is a product, right? They went from sponsoring these orgs to then just being like, why am I giving money to this middleman when I could just have the team myself, right? I'm providing you 90% of your revenue over a year. Why don't I just have my name on the organization at that point in time? Why don't I just pay for these players directly? Right.
I mean, a lot of these storied orgs are just gone. Like they've just been destroyed either by incompetence, negligence, maliciousness, or time. But it ruins a lot of the storylines for sure.
Yeah. And I think that is the part that is just like, again, there is something to blame here, but it's not necessarily like, it's like this bigger like problem where Dota 2 has no consistency in its teams throughout most of its history, right? Where like the players playing together, right? That got broken up every single year, all the time. There hasn't been any consistency in orgs, with a lot of the orgs going defunct. The player-owned organizations not doing as well anymore. Like orgs hopping in and out of Dota over time because, salaries weren't manageable or whatever, right? And then players is another problem where, the players who were good were on top for a long time, but that eventually has to come to an end. And there is a whole new generation of players. But frankly, like, I think a lot of the audience doesn't have the same kind of like, they're not spam watching as much as they used to anymore. So they don't get as tied to the players, right? People would always say like, oh, I just follow a player from team to team. Right. That's how people got used to Dota. Well, what happens if that player retires? Well, now you have to find a new player to watch, but you have less time and you're just like different as a person. So you're not going to get as invested in a single person.
Yeah. Not everybody can be as in tune with the new generation of Dota players as you, Austin.
That's true.
I think we established that. I mean, you just can spot that new generation from a mile away, faster.
I mean, what can I say? I recognize talent. Yeah, even if I don't got it myself, I could see it in other people, Avery. And that's why I picked you as my co-caster.
An admirable trait. I don't know.
Yeah, so it's just like there it's hard to find an identity as a Dota 2 fan and like, what am I cheering for? Who am I cheering for?
I agree.
And in this weird transition, but I think there is a future, right? Gaming Gladiators have been back in the same team, this entire team. That team has stayed the same. And we agree that a lot of these teams are probably going to stay consistent. We're probably not going to be swapping out as many players as possible. So we are building that consistency, right? We have kept the same Gaming Gladiators for the last 2 or 3 years. We have kept, or 2 years, we have kept the same, like kind of the same Team Liquid, right? Swapping out one player every year, but like kind of the same for the last like 3 or 4 years at this point in time. Team Spirit have stayed the same outside of one player for the last 3 years. And, we'll see where we go from there, right? BetBoom, as uncharismatic as that roster is, right? They have kind of stayed the same, so there does seem to be consistency. There does seem to be that like players are staying more grouped up, which means you can kind of cheer for the team. So if the team ends up going to a different organization, you can follow them, kind of that way. I just think that we're kind of in this weird space where a lot of people grew up watching X, Y, and Z player. Those players can't play for 20 years. People are going to start retiring. That's just the way it goes.
But
and I think enough of them have retired.
I still go back to the storylines element. Like, I just don't think any of that's going to matter if you can't create storylines behind that consistency. Like, I don't think there's actually that many fans of Gaming Gladiators relative to how much they've won in Dota.
Yeah,
like, I don't really feel like I meet people or see people that are like, I really want Gaming to win. Like, I love watching Gaming, build ors and push high ground. Like, nobody, if anything, the most interaction that org had was when everybody hated Quinn and he was like a heel. Yeah. That was kind of it. Like, and I don't think it's their fault. I think it's all of their wins have come from dominating other European teams, mainly Liquid. Like, I mean, that's part of it too. That doesn't help. Mm-hmm. It's the same team, but like, honestly, a lot of their wins in big tournaments in the final 3 to 4 days, especially in the top 3 to 6, have been other European teams. DPC was a lot of European teams. How many tournaments do we go to where like the final 4 or 5 out of 6 are the European DPC again, right?
Yeah.
Plus like one outsider. And it doesn't help them because they can't build anything off that. They're not dominating anybody who's an underdog or a dark horse or an enemy or a counter region that plays different or something. Like, they just haven't had that challenge, and it really hurts their victories a lot compared to some of the older ones.
So you think the DPC killed Dota?
Killed what?
Dota. The DPC. It killed Dota.
It might have hurt the storylines indirectly because it shifted a lot of the power to Europe, which was unintentional and I think really difficult to see. I don't know. People could have seen that happening,
but... I'm not saying, but it's you would think that supporting all the regions, you would think supporting all the regions would have helped the lesser regions, right? By giving them a source of income. But what actually happened was that we locked people into cages, and like the people in the strong region got really goddamn strong because iron sharpens iron, and I mean, that might have exacerbated it. I think against each other, and the other regions didn't get a chance to interact.
I think that was more COVID than DPC, honestly. I think the 2 or 3 COVID years really killed some of the weaker regions because they didn't have the finances to support the scene in equal ways. Like, I remember NA Dota got destroyed by COVID. Like, only 2 teams survived that. It was me and the other EG at the time. Nobody else survived that, really. Just wiped out the entire scene. Like, you can't play in NA for 2 years.
It was a weak region and an expensive. Weak and expensive. It's like the worst combination.
So much of the money left, orgs left. You couldn't go to LAN for 2 years. That was all NA had, was international LAN. There's nothing in NA. Just wiped the region out. Like, I think that did way more damage. And then on top of that, I think there was an inevitability of Europe had a much larger player base in pubs in the game. They had more players to draw from. They had more people on the younger side. They could pull from Eastern Europe and Western Europe together. I think that was inevitably going to make that region the strongest. Like, I don't think the other regions were going to be able to compete. And I think if you look at where other regions were to start that, they were probably behind anyway.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think Southeast Asia or NA were ahead when that race started. So
sure,
you were already in a tough spot. I wouldn't say it was like DPC. It was a culmination of factors, but yeah, like, where is the EG, this org that has been in Dota forever, gone to every TI, consistently has the ability to challenge top teams that you can root for, right? If I want to see these European top dogs,
who am I cheering for? Right now it's Extreme. You're cheering for Extreme. That's it.
Yeah. But like, let's say I want to go into the next LAN and I'm like, I'm tired of seeing Falcons, Gaming, and Liquid win everything. I'm sick of these fucking teams. I want to see somebody beat them. I want to see someone beat their ass. Who are you going to vote for? That, like, old DG was one of the ways you could do that, right? Be like, this time, this like Arteezy Sumail stack, they got the skill. They're going to come in. They're going to take some of these big dogs down. The old LGD was a version of that, right? And consistent Chinese team that could challenge everybody and potentially win a TI.
The Copium was still a little bit, it was more effective for Southeast Asia. a few years ago. Every year that it goes by,
For sure.
you need more and more to get the same.
But they used to be able to, like the old Mushi stacks or some of the Ice stacks and stuff like that.
Or once you started, mixing
challenge.
Southeast Asia and China, then you could kind of claim like Team DK as like, they're Southeast Asian, kind of. It's 2 out of 2 C players, 3 Chinese players. Yeah.
But the gap wasn't that big. And I don't know. That stuff just doesn't fucking exist now. It's only Team Spirit. That's why I root for Team Spirit. Like, at least there's somewhat of an outlier storyline that can challenge this big European team conglomerate and do something with it and has a cool play style. But otherwise, there's not much difference. And I think that hurts it the most. And I think a lot of these other factors like the COVID lockdown, the DPC being the only thing there, putting Europe in a vacuum, them getting like insanely powerful. A lot of the money that remains is still in that region and not in a lot of others. Like these factors.
Cloud9 is now a European. They're backing Europe rather than obviously back in the day they were NA.
All of this just compounds and compounds, and you're just left with what it feels like for the viewer today, which I think is very uneventful and something that I have no interest to really get invested in player wise, because there's no interest storyline wise. And then the biggest factor, I think, if you compare it to like traditional sports, is you were talking about, if I'm a fan of a sports franchise or team that sucks ass, why do I keep remaining a fan of that team? Because one, it can be fun to root for a team that sucks ass, but you need some sort of hope at the end of that tunnel.
Yeah.
Of like, eventually we're going to come back, and then my rooting for them when they suck ass was all worth it, and then I can shove it in everybody else's face. That's the whole point of it. That exists in traditional sports because there's mechanics that always make sure a team in any sort of league or franchise can make that comeback eventually, right? A lot of times it's like draft mechanics, right? You get better picks and lottery tickets and stuff like that if you're the last place in the league, stuff like that. Or you can accumulate trade assets through draft and eventually use those down the road, right? Nobody stays on top 100% forever. But there are mechanics that at least give you hope as a fan. None of that exists in Dota. There's no mechanic. Once you start sucking ass in Dota, it just compounds and it becomes even worse for you because your pull is worse. You probably can get worse sponsors. You can pay people less. Then your team's slightly worse again. You have to get lucky, honestly. Like, you have to find some diamonds in the rough. You have to find some players that your scouting has to be insane, and you find those guys that are going to win you lands out of nowhere that you can pay a third or fourth of the price of the general market and like recuperate your brand value somehow, right? And even then it might not be good enough, but like, that is the only mechanic you have, is scouting. Basically, there is nothing else that helps you when you're down in the ditches. So like, as a fan of a team that sucks, you're just like, this is just fucking garbage. Like, what are we doing here?
And again, they might not be like, that organization may not be in Dota next year, or the team that they're backing may be an entirely different team. So
why root for them? Yeah. Like, why am I going to root for this team that's going to be gone in a year? No point.
Well, in which case you are just a fan of good Dota, and that's why you tune in, right? Because you like the game so much.
Yeah, and then you can complain about how the patch sucks and people are going high ground at 30 minutes and there's no good story, and because there's no good storylines,
Speaking of the patch, do you have anything positive to add to this at the end of it? Like, is there any hope at the end of the tunnel, or are you just going to follow the story and just be like, there is no light at the end of the tunnel for these teams, nor for the fans in the future of Dota? Because I remember Avery Silverman 6 months ago or something was trying to do this big pitch about like why you should support, why you should become a fan of some of these teams, and like challenging people to just like, stop defaulting to following Team Secret and then complaining that they suck, and like become a fan of a new team and one of these new rosters. That's
and I thought about why that's hard to do, right? That's I guess what this discussion's about. Like, why is that hard
I'm just saying that Avery was so optimistic, and now we're
I mean, I think as long as this like European dominance storyline prohibitive thing exists, it's going to be tough. I'll put it that way. But it doesn't mean some of this stuff can't come back. It doesn't mean you can't have a C team that starts doing well and builds up some fans. It doesn't mean you can't have Spirit who creates some good storylines. It doesn't mean you can't have like an RTZ team that comes back in some capacity somewhere to create some threat. It doesn't mean you can't have some threats that start to build up in other places. I wouldn't bet on it. I don't feel like it's happening right now,
Yeah. It almost sounds like to me that like in order to save Dota, we need to start getting bad blood coursing through these Team Liquid's Gaming Gladiators and like blow up their teams. But then that kills the entire consistency thing that we were talking about, you know?
Yeah, they won't. It will never happen because there's no incentive for that to exist for them.
Well,
the way it's currently set up,
then it's also banned for the fan if we break up those teams.
But they don't. Yeah, they don't. But they don't care about the fans, right? None of these teams or players care about the fans.
Sure. Yeah.
They have no incentive to care about the fans. The orgs care about the fans. The players don't give a fuck. Like, let's be real, guys. Players don't give a fuck about you.
Most of the players.
They don't give a shit. It's irrelevant.
There are. I think there are more players in the scene right now who try and do right by the fans than there.
That doesn't mean they care about them. That does not mean they care about them.
Okay, sure.
You know, a guy's going to be like, oh, I like the fan support. You guys are great. Thank you. But like, his life and experience and goals and everything have nothing to do with the fans. If he had 0 fan support or 100, it would make no difference to most of these people. That's the reality, because it just doesn't matter in Dota. It matters when you're on LAN and like people are cheering for you or not. That's the only tangible part that it matters. And then they feel it, and then they go like, oh, it's kind of nice or not. And then they care.
But we haven't had that many.
Yeah, but that
we
just
have
doesn't
less
happen.
and less crowd interactions with the team.
So that part also goes down,
because more and more people are doing like LAN studio tournaments, or they're doing only the final 2 days or whatever. TI, good example. We're only going to have 3 days where the teams are going to be playing in front of an audience. So
that audience matters if they're your fans or not, for sure. It's going to affect how well you can play and your chances of winning. And the players care then. But the percentage of your time where that exists is going down and down over time. So like, they're inevitably going to care less if people actually like them or not. They're just going to play efficiently and be a machine. And that's why you have all these machine learning European teams that are just like grinding out how to play the most efficient Dota possible and win them as efficiently as possible and shake hands and go next. Then like any of this other stupid shit, it just doesn't matter.
You are making me miss MVP Phoenix right now.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of past teams that had a lot of flair and creativity and stuff because they wanted to play a certain way, because the game wasn't as figured out and it wasn't as efficient, and you didn't have to be as tight on these margins to win. That's another big factor. I'm not blaming these teams. That's just how the game developed. But yeah, these teams like MVP Phoenix or the old Eternal Envy squads, stuff like that, like these teams cannot win today. They'd have 0 chance. So you're not going to have those storylines going for you either, of somebody who comes in and just plays the game an entirely different way and is like, holy shit, what's going on here? You know, what is this guy doing? I don't understand. That's just not going to happen. Everybody understands what's going on now. It's not hard to figure out, right? We can go in and analyze and break down any game and draft in like an hour and pretty much tell 95% of what's going on. There's always going to be a little bit hidden, but it's mostly just strategy and reasons for things, not like some hidden idea. And most of these teams know this as well. So like the game has been figured out, but to a way larger degree, which also kills some of the unknown or some of the storyline telling and that type of thing. So again, these factors, I just don't think you can reverse them. You can't like change them. I don't know. And then it's just a question of, well, how do you make these teams more unique? Like, how do you give Gaiman versus Liquid versus Falcons versus Tundra, like more unique identity to them as a team? I don't know. Like, that's a good question. Tough.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Avery, for bringing that very depressing topic to Not For Broadcast.
It's analyzing the scene as a whole. It's not depressing.
You know what? In the future, just leave the topics to me, okay? Leave the topics to me. Don't bring any more of those. I mean, we ended, it just sounds very depressing. The area that we ended up with, which is that basically it sounds to me like it's hard to be a Dota fan and people are just naturally just going to lose interest. But that hasn't been the case. There's still a high viewership.
I disagree, but you know, I think viewership is high, but I think a huge chunk of the viewership has transitioned from people who are watching because they care about what's happening and find it entertaining to people watching because they have money on the line. And I think those are two very different things. And I personally do not equate those two viewerships. I know the number's the same on the stream, but like,
yeah,
for me, as someone who actually loves the game and the scene and growing up with it and putting my life into it, to me, those are not the same.
Yeah, definitely the community behind it and the heart behind it is definitely a bit different. Okay, well, thank you, Avery, for killing another point to try and contradict.
Where's the game? What happened to the game I love?
What happened to the game I love?
What happened to the game I love? You know, it used to be you go on a stream and it's like 25,000 OG fans rooting against 25,000 Liquid fans, and they hate each other and they're spewing shit, and you could tell they were invested. And now it's like I go in there's 40,000 dudes who bet on the game, and there's like 5,000 dudes who are like, is this League of Legends? And then there's like 5,000 who are just like arguing with each other about like why Trump got shot or something. You know, there's just like what's going on in this? You know, there's like, I don't recognize this. What happened to the game I love, Austin? That's all I'm saying. You know.
Well, a patch happened.
That's true.
There was a patch that happened. Last time we talked, we were saying, is there going to be a patch before TI? Well, there was going to be a patch before TI, and there was going to be a second patch before TI. We had 737 and 737B. So maybe the esports side sucks, but the game itself, Avery, better than ever? Or what?
Oh, yeah. You're cranking them out, man. I mean, nobody can argue with that. I haven't heard one person say that Dota is not more fun to play than it was 5 years ago.
Well, no, I still no. I see that sentiment, not necessarily about funness per se, but people complaining about the power scaling and the problems that
whatever,
creates.
Dude. People always gonna bitch about that.
Yeah, I haven't I see people wishing for the olden days of Dota, but I don't actually see them saying it was more fun back then. Again, I feel like it's just some nostalgia pill where people are like, I wish it was like it was back then. But they don't actually critically think about it and realize that, the game was actually better or more fun back then, or the game is not fun now. It was just you were a different person. It was newer.
I think the game's doing great. I think they've done a decent job on the game. I think the patches have been on point in time, mostly bounce patch wise. Obviously, Ringmaster, who the fuck knows what's going on with that? But I never really cared about new heroes, so
I think the facets were definitely way more interesting, but. To tie this into the previous conversation, this patch, is it going to break up the Western European dynasty that has been built up between these 4-5 teams?
What
was it enough to break the auras? No. That means they didn't do a good enough job to kill the auras.
Look, the only way you're breaking that shit up, man, is if God comes down and gives half those fuckers COVID like I got and just wipes them out for 2 months. Other people got a chance, you know? Or maybe he extracts. There's a information extraction machine. I don't know, but I don't think Balance is going to do it. I mean, Balance could fuck one of those teams over. Gaming could get fucked again for another month or two, or right. If you're pretty hero pool dependent, which a lot of these teams are because they're becoming more and more solid in what they want to do as opposed to being able to do everything, then yeah, it's going to be more volatile in terms of who's on top, but those teams are just still too far ahead.
Okay. So let me be more specific with my question. Did they kill the auras enough for you?
Oh man.
What is your prediction for TI meta? Have you played any games on the new patch?
No. I was sick, dude. What do you want from me? I did watch a lot, though. I was watching a lot of streams.
Yeah.
I've been watching a lot of the high-level pubs through Snake King stream and stuff like that. So I have been seeing how the games are going and stuff. The pubs are definitely not aura-based, right?
No.
I think that much is clear. So they obviously killed it on a pub level, and that does translate to competitive to a decent degree. But I still have a feeling that there will be some sort of unkillable meta that will develop at TI. I still think that has not been changed. So whatever that ends up being, I think will be annoying to watch.
Okay.
Will that be aura based? Hard to tell right now, right?
Right.
It could be another hard blade mail thing. Could be spam Wind Waker thing, right? There's a lot of ways
I'm seeing more utility items in that regard. I'm still seeing a bunch of Yules and Wind Wakers, but I'm also seeing more Solar Crests and Glimmer Capes. as opposed to pipes.
There's something out there right now that's the most efficient version of it, which is what's being figured out. I don't know if it'll be as hardcore aura spam go like Gaiman was doing at EWC. I think that has been nerfed a bit. But I don't think there's really any crazy stall mechanics or anything like that. And I still think Dota is about making yourself unkillable. Like, the more of your heroes you can make unkillable, the harder all of your heroes are to kill, including supports, either through mobility spells or defense mechanics or aura grouping or raw HP levels, the easier the game is to play. It's just easier. You don't have to think as much. You get jumped, who gives a fuck? They lost. Like, they jump you, they lost. That's the situation you want to create. Or you have like Tiny, because Tiny's a bullshit hero. But that's what I think it comes down to. And so whatever items do that the most efficient in the meta are where it's going to go, in my opinion. What that'll be for TI, I don't know. But I could definitely see it being... I could see it being less aura-based and more utility-based. Like going maybe back to more Glimmer 4-staffs, bailout mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Even maybe some saving heroes come back in, like these like Oracle SD, Omni Knight, weird stuff like that, right? If it becomes kind of good in certain niche situations.
So can I lend you a stat here to back up your point about the unkillable meta? I'm glad you led it this way.
Does it make me look smart?
I looked this up before. You want to know what the tie-in between the top 4 heroes win rate wise on Dota 2 Pro Tracker are?
What are you asking? I don't know.
The trait between the top 4 win rate heroes on Dota 2 Pro Tracker. Yeah.
Dota 2 Pro Tracker pub win rate top 4 heroes. I mean, I'm assuming it's like an unkillableness, but I'm trying to think of what they are right now for this patch. What are they?
Yeah. They all kind of function in the same role, and they all have a similar mechanic.
I think it's like healers. It was like Tinker, Omni Knight.
Chen, Omni Knight, Undying, Train Protector. Yeah. Tinker has dropped down, but he's still in the top 10.
Yeah, of course. He was there, though.
Yeah. Abaddon is actually there as well. And Valve actually, I did not feel like Abaddon was strong, but actually in the B patch, they nerfed Miscoil 2 different ways, I believe. So obviously they had the stats.
He might have been like quietly broken, but he had laning issues, you know?
But yeah, so that kind of backs up what you're saying about the tank meta.
I mean, so here's the mechanic that I feel like never gets talked about in all these metas is sustain. But the more broken auras are, the more broken sustain is. They're directly correlated, basically.
Yeah.
Which I think, the easiest explanation is just, well, the more buffs and resistances you put on someone, the more efficient the HP you give them is. If you can heal someone for 100 and they have 70% resist, that's pretty good. If you heal someone for 100 and they have 0% resist, it's way worse. So the more you stack all these auras and give people resistances, and they have 60% magic resist, 80% physical resist, heals are worth a lot. And heals are worth way more than nukes. So you having nukes is irrelevant. You having heals is very good, especially when you're pushing. Makes sense, but so basically, if you have supports that can provide consistent healing throughout a game and can win the lane, they tend to be pretty good in those types of metas, in the unkillable metas. The exception, I think, was the Heart Blade Mail meta, because the Heart Blade Mail meta did not stack resistances. It just increased your raw HP, which actually made heals less efficient on your own team. So in those situations, you actually wanted heroes with save or disruption mechanics, because then you keep the regen running. Like you bail them out of the fight, they keep the regen and go back in. So like heroes with 4 stabs, glimmers, disruption mechanics like Shadow Demon were really good in the Heart Blade Mail meta. I think it's one of the reasons we actually saw Shadow Demon rise up in that meta, because the bailout mechanic for that type of tankiness is insanely valuable, where the heal isn't. In a push meta, the heal is super valuable. Enchantress, like this Enchantress heal and stuff, is just like, it's so mind-bogglingly stupid. Like when you have a hero like Enchantress or Undying or Abaddon that can win its lane or Treant from an early pick and then give you a sustain mechanic for these lineups that want to push higher on at 30, they're just insanely busted. There's nothing that gives you a higher level of like HP versus damage efficiency in the game, basically.
Yeah.
And Chen is obviously up there too. Like Chen is the premier version of that, because the hero historically, when he wins lane, he wins it hard. And then not only does he give you the heal, he gives you the heal and the resistance stacking. It is like insanely stupid. It's insanely stupid on so many levels. I cannot tell you how conceptually stupid this hero is in the modern age of Dota 2. Like, he might be the stupidest, actually. We could have an entire hour-long discussion on how absolutely stupid conceptually Chen is. I don't think I've ranted about this, but like,
No,
because I think most people
you
complain
haven't.
about Chen of like, oh, Chen's just broken. Like, oh, he's just Chen. His numbers are... No, this hero is so fundamentally stupid on so many numbers levels in the modern age of Dota 2. I am astounded whenever there's a bounce patch where he isn't played. Like, anytime this hero is not played, I'm just like, my God, like something must be horribly broken about the creeps or his laning or something that just prohibits it. Because everything else this hero does is so fundamentally broken, it's absurd. Like,
Really?
yes.
The way you're ranting about this, I feel like, okay, so
There are certain heroes like that in Dota.
okay,
Like I've said this
I
before,
agree.
for different reasons. You know,
Like
Tiny is
I
fundamentally
feel like
broken.
I have this rant about Nature's Prophet. Yeah.
Yeah, NP is a weird one though, because he actually exists in a lot of states where his numbers and spells are just so bad he's like unplayable.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But fundamentally, he can be like that. Tiny is like that for sure, because he's the best displacement in the game on low cooldown. It's fundamentally stupid for any sort of high pressure team fight situation. Io is another hero like that. Unless Io's numbers are so bad, the hero fundamentally creates your unkillable hero even more unkillable. It's just entirely stupid. But Chen is like the worst to me. Chen
Io
is
does
actually
have
the
a
worst.
54% win rate, by the way, right now.
I'm
on
still
Dota
surprised
2
we
Pro
don't see as
Tracker,
much IO
so-
as we do. I think the only reason we didn't see as much IO is his pairings were kind of bad in the last meta, and his laning was a little weaker than some of the other like big healers like the Enches and Chens, you know? Otherwise, we would have seen him for sure. Like, you would have just run this IO Tiny, I'm hitting your building at 30, IO Alchemist, this type of shit. It's so fundamentally stupid. Like, there's no damage ramp that competes with it. You just don't have damage. You just lose. It's literally that simple. And these supports exist. And Chen is always the worst of them. They did so much to make this hero unbelievably stupid on so many levels. Like, I just, when you start to add it all up, it's just like, how does this hero exist? And how is he ever going to be balanced in the modern age of Dota? He never will be. I don't believe Chen will ever be balanced again. He will either be first pick broken or he will not be picked at all. There's no in between. And anytime you see people unsure, they're just dumb, honestly.
Okay. Fair enough. This conversation about healers does actually tie into one of the questions that we had lined up. We'll do the question of the week now, then, with just some guy without a Mustang 6436. He says, wow, finally, not much questions in ComSec. I can finally ask mine. How come that healing meta isn't a thing anymore? Wonder if Valve would introduce this in the future where you can 5 hero with heals, but it wouldn't be meh. I know you have to make too much of a compromise to achieve that, but imagine having Jug, Necrophos, Witch Doctor, Pugna, and Chen to counter 5-ban Deathball strat, because I only see healing heroes used as utility rather than being the core idea of the draft. Hope you can share some insights regarding this. If not, I'll ask again in the future. And obviously, we're talking about healing meta right now, but one thing that we didn't talk about is healing cores. We don't see Necro, we don't see Death Prophet. So if heal is broken, why is it only coming from the support side?
Because there are a lot more cores that can win you the game with their damage than there are with heals. Like, and they're just better heroes. A lot of these healing cores are generally weaker because they get nerfed, because their pub win rate goes up astronomically the second they're viable, basically. Because heals are kind of fundamentally broken. Like, when people are playing kind of bad, they're on a lower tier level, they're not as good at sniping a healing ward or bursting a Death Prophet or dealing with a Necrophos, right? The heals add up in like those games and their pub win rate skyrockets. Like, the highest win rate hero forever in Dota was Omni Knight, right? I think he was number 1 on pub win rates for like forever. Just because he's a healer. Like, you 5-man with him in a random pub and you heal somebody, you're probably going to win. Like, your chance to win just go up.
And
So they are kind of
entirely how Slacks raised his MMR as high as he did, right? He literally just played Omni Knight and just healed people. He just sat there and just responded to enemy going on somebody and healed them and repelled them.
So it's really dangerous to have a core, especially, but any hero that can raise its pub win rate that much when its function is a healer, which there's certain heroes in Dota that can heal you, but that's not their function. And there's certain heroes in Dota that's their function. You know, heroes like Undying or Enchantress or Chen, they are healers, but that's not their entire function as a hero. So it's easier to have them in the competitive meta and bounce their pub win rate. A hero like Death Prophet or Necrophos is based on a heal mechanic. It has to function around the heal mechanic. Makes them really hard to bounce on a pub and competitive level. Because the second they're kind of viable, they just become insanely broken and they just ruin pubs. Just ruin them left and right. You know, that's when you have people bitching like, this guy's unkillable, can't do anything, he just dominates my lane, can't lane against him, right? We've all been in those patches where Necro and DP are strong on lane and they're just completely oppressive because laning mechanics in pubs are kind of bad. So they just auto win every lane. They group up and heal. Really hard to beat them. But in competitive, when those heroes are viable, they're absolutely viable. And we see that. And they dominate. Honestly, they dominate. Like a lot of the metas where Death Prophet's viable, she tends to be a high pick. One, she can flex around a lot of lanes and stuff. But like, since they introduced Death Siphons or Soul Siphons, whatever the fuck they're called.
Spirit.
Yeah, Spirit Siphons.
Your favorite team. Can't believe you forgot that.
I mean, the hero is kind of fundamentally stupid. Like if you can group up behind the hero, throw a bunch of resistances on her and just let her siphon people, you can't really out damage it. You need significant burst or jump first, or, you know, you basically have to outplay it. You can always outplay something in Dota 2. But from a number standpoint, it's very strong. And we see this, like Chinese teams have used it for years. Chinese teams would group up behind a Death Prophet, push, take Roche, go high ground with Exorcism. The Exo's hitting your build and you have to go in the DP. As long as they have some sort of save or bailout mechanic, that fight's pretty hard for you. But the hero has to be viable enough that you can lane with it and play with it and do damage and still do stuff. You still have to be able to do a certain amount of fundamental stuff in a Dota game to be viable. I think that's where most of those heroes lie. Like the heroes like Juggernaut, Necro, DP that we don't see a lot are because they're really hard for Valve to bounce between pub and competitive. But I would argue when they are good, that they are picked at a pretty high rate and fairly successful. I think it's rare you see a meta where like the Jug and the DP are good and they're picked and they don't seem like good heroes or threats, you know?
Yeah.
Like they tend to work out pretty well in the metas where they work out. It's like Nature's Prophet or IO, right?
Yeah.
These heroes that when they're viable, like you have to deal with them. You can't just ignore them in a meta. You can't not play them. So I think sustain is very strong. I think healing with the way resistances work and the more of them that have been introduced and the more the ways that you can stack auras is like, especially with heroes base HP pools being higher, which means your chances to burst them with flat damage initially is lower as well. All of these things add up. Again, this is why Chen is so fucking stupid, because Chen has access to some of the most fundamentally broken auras in the game. I'm not talking about mech or buckler or pipe. I'm talking about golem granite aura.
Yep.
This thing is insanely stupid.
Max HP increase. Yeah.
Insanely stupid. It still exists in the game. I can't believe I've never ranted about this before, but like, what an absurdly stupid idea of like, you can raise everybody's base HP when you're stacking other auras on top of them and you're a healer. It's like absolutely fucking mind boggling. And then you have stacking magic resist auras off the little dudes. And at some point they literally stacked. You could have like 4 of them. You remember that Chen patch?
Yeah.
Where you run around with fucking 4 little centaurs and everybody has
it's like 20% magic resistance bonus for your entire team or something. Yeah.
Why does this
exist?
Just
have like a free pipe on top of an actual pipe.
But the fact you can still get that is still incredibly stupid. And then you can just put all these on top of people, and it's like no other hero can do that. They can't match it because you can't take creeps. You know, you can get a Helmet Dominator, I guess. I don't fucking know. But like, those are more things that make Chen even stupider. Yeah, and I think it's incredibly dumb.
I will add more things back to the original question about these healers and stuff. I would also say that another reason you don't see them, despite the sustain and is that one of the ways that they output damage, which if your cores need to be responsible for that aspect of your lineup a lot of the times, right? They need to have output damage. Well, the damage they're outputting is very often spell damage, and we had Pipe. We just went through a meta where Pipe was very strong. We had a meta where Blade Mail and Heart was very strong. So just like naturally, any spell damage is probably going to fall off, especially if it's not percentage-based spell damage. If it's flat, it's definitely not going to be doing the job. We're now in a barrier meta where we have Tinker, who even after this last nerf is still an absolutely disgusting hero. We have Solar Crest running around, Glimmer Cape, Warcry. Like there's a lot of ways to prevent damage that's coming in. You also have Mage Slayer, which does affect these heroes a lot because they're very often spell focused. Necrophos, Death Prophet specifically. Spells, it does impact like Exorcism, for example. Mage Slayer has an impact on Exorcism. Even though you think of that as physical damage, it's still a spell. So, like, very often these healers are also spell casters, in which case they're affected by a lot of these sustain items quite a bit. And also, if your core is in charge of doing damage, like some of your cores have to be in charge of putting out some sort of damage. Right now, I feel like the damage, because I agree with Avery that healing or sustain or unkillableness, you need to have heroes that can actually punch through that, in which case, some of the most successful heroes right now, right? Quap Dagon, right? That's just straight, just damage. Lena is climbing up the ranks right now. Wind Ranger core has been a thing for a while. Carry Wind Ranger specifically has gone up the most, I think, in the last 2 patches. Specifically, that hero is designed to punch through a hero. No matter how many heals you throw at it, she has unlimited damage. She will just keep pumping it out, and eventually she will kill you and get that 4 versus 5, right? Chaos Knight, right? Yeah, tanky hero, but like also what he's really good at is being able to punch down one hero faster than most other heroes. And I think the other hero he listed there, Juggernaut, just can't punch through heroes the way that any of these other heroes could, because Omni Slash just is Omni Slash. Yeah, you could do that if there was one target, but more often than not, your Omni Slash is bouncing all over the place. The damage is spread. You do a Blade Fury, you're not out. You're just not putting enough damage to kill one person with all these like heals and group up mechanics and everything that's going on.
Yeah, the hero has damage doing problems, though Healing Word is a broken spell. Yeah, we've actually seen people trying to make support Jug work for that reason. I've seen high level, even like people like Tofu and stuff play support Jug, because the Healing Word is insanely broken in like this group up meta, but the hero has too many other issues. I don't know. It'll be interesting if we do end up in some sort of like barrier meta. I don't think we will, but that's a really weird one because the barriers are not like barriers don't behave like a lot of other resistance stacking, You can't really buff barriers. You can't like make use of barriers through heals. They're kind of weird.
I mean, I guess my point with the barriers thing is that like it doesn't all kind of fill into the unkillableness, right?
Yeah, but
I kind of call the aura meta. It's like a lot of times, like not all of them are auras, right? Some of them are Glimmer Capes and Solar Crest, but they all kind of are doing the same thing, right? Which is they're all just trying to some active, like technically Crimson Guard is not an aura, but it's like it functions as one. You activate it, and it makes your team less killable.
Yeah, but it makes the response to them different. What answers that type of mechanic best becomes different. Or what hero uses it the best becomes different, right? Certain heroes will use aura stacking or barriers or displacement or something better than a lot of other stuff. So, if you're looking like what's the meta TI going to be like, your answer could be hidden somewhere in there depending on which direction this type of thing goes. Of like, what are people going to play, and then what are they going to try and answer with? I don't know. It's very tough. I think there are certain heroes that are supposed to answer some of these things, and they're just not viable enough, or they can't come online fast enough. Things like Slark. Like Slark in theory is supposed to be an answer to sustain lineups, because as a sustain lineup, you're supposed to lack a bit of damage, and Slark can go in and he just like hitting you. He doesn't care if he's dealing damage because he's going to get 50 stacks and you're dead. And you sustaining into stacks is awful. Like stack-based heroes are supposed to be a sustain answer in a lot of ways. But the problem is like these heroes that are being sustained are also just doing so much damage and sometimes through the same mechanics. It's just like you can't exist there and get the stacks up fast enough. You just can't build it, and you just get run the fuck over, It's like, I don't really know how to adjust for that. You have to make them stronger or buff these heroes or something. Like heroes like OD, like who the fuck is going to play OD into like a push lineup? You'd be mentally unstable to do that. But in theory, he's like mechanically supposed to be good against that type of thing. Same with Sark, but you can't play these heroes into it.
Because mechanically they're set up against it, but strategically, like timing wise, usually it's really bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. They can't deal with the timings. They're not that good in the actual 5-man scenario unless you can buff them enough that they can go in first. So like creates a really weird situation strategically, which is usually why the way you would just answer these things is by doing it back and just doing it better. Like honestly is what it comes down to a lot. Someone's going to play Omni Knight and fucking buff their Sark with like Repel Solar Crest. Well, you better have like fucking Io who buffs your Monkey King with Overcharge and Power back. You better be able to match it and do it back. That's what it comes down to a lot.
All right. I'm realizing how long this conversation has gone on. So hopefully we have answered your question, as we have gone an hour and a half doing this podcast.
But we missed last week. So,
let's just close it out here. And hopefully you guys enjoyed another episode of Not for Broadcast. The future is very bright in Dota, everybody. Keep watching this podcast.